Hello, YouTube and Game of Thrones fans. This is the Six Sigma, and this is a look ahead, a recap and analysis of the recently aired Game of Thrones episode. With one episode left in Season 7, Episode 6 was an action packed and eventful episode, as is tradition for the second to last episode of the season. In this video, we are going to discuss the events of this episode and what we should expect to see in the finale. So, let's begin. Now, this episode began with Jon and the rest of the crew that went north. They are hiking and looking for the army of the dead. Now, there was some dialogue in these scenes, but little that seemed of high importance to the story. The most important dialogue seemed to be Jon's attempt to give Jorah Longclaw back. Jon tells Jorah it's his family's sword and tries to return it, but Jorah refuses to take it. Jorah then tells Jon that his children might need the sword. Now, the irony here is that if Jon does fall in love with Daenerys, her prophecy of not being able to bear children plays a role. However, this line could be important if the show does end with Daenerys and Jon having a child. And if that were to happen, could this mean that something devastating might happen to Jon? As the witch said to Daenerys in Season 1, only death can pay for life. If Daenerys becomes pregnant by Jon, his death might be the price to pay for an heir. Or it could be the other way around. Notice how the fact that Daenerys can't have children is being brought up so frequently now. It was even brought up to Jon Snow by Daenerys herself at the end of the episode. And you have to ask yourself why. And notice how Jorah's line about Jon's children seemed to be emphasized. It might be these subtle hints that foreshadow what's to come in Season 8. The scene then cuts back to Arya and Sansa in Winterfell arguing about the scroll Arya found in Baelish's room. Now, these scenes really seem like distractions to make it seem like there was actually a conflict between Arya and Sansa, but in reality, Baelish is the real enemy, and I'm pretty sure Arya knows it. Arya and Sansa's current conflict just seems to be an extension of their rivalry in Season 1, but they don't seem to be serious as we see from later on in the episode. And at the end of the episode, Arya's threats to Sansa simply seem to be Arya scaring Sansa. Arya knows Sansa is on her side, but likely creates a conflict to throw Baelish off. Again, it seems as if Arya was playing along with Baelish's game to make him think he has the upper hand, which will likely show up in the finale. If I had to guess, I'd say next episode might be Baelish's last of the show. Then we head back to Jon Snow and Beric Dondarrion speaking to one another. Now, the scene was relatively boring, but the implications of their conversation are huge. These are the only two men brought back by the Lord of Light, and Beric is making note of it. Jon says he doesn't worship the Lord of Light, but Beric reminds him that he has a role to play as his servant. Now, I've mentioned a theory about Bran being the Lord of Light before, and these types of conversations are the reason I believe that theory is on to something. If Bran was the Lord of Light, then these two characters likely have a shared destiny. It's hard to say exactly what that destiny is, but I would imagine that it will be revealed in Season 8 when the battle versus the White Walkers becomes real. From the looks of it though, I would imagine we will have some sort of huge scene with these two given that theory. We'll just have to wait and find out in Season 8. Next, we see Tyrion and Daenerys talking about Jon Snow. So this was yet another moment where Daenerys' feelings for Jon seem to be conveyed, but the attention is shifted to Daenerys' plans after she takes the Iron Throne. Tyrion then mentions the line of succession, which once again brings us back to the issue of Jon and her having children. Again, this is something we should take note of now that it has been mentioned multiple times. After that scene, the episode then focuses on more short-term problems. A White Walker polar bear attacks the group and ends up killing Thoros of Myr. Sansa talks to Baelish about her fears of Arya, which Baelish seems to have cleverly created, or so he thinks. And Jon's group encounters a small group of White Walkers. They kill the leader, and the rest of the walkers shatter except for one lone survivor. They tie that one up and prepare to escape when the White Walker screams and summons the army of the dead. As Gendry runs off to help, the rest of the group runs to the center of an ice lake, and the White Walkers begin to fall in the icy water when the ice collapses. The group is left stuck on an island, and they wait for their inevitable fate. As they wait, Thoros of Myr dies overnight, and Jon asserts that they will wait for Daenerys to save them. So there was really one major takeaway from this scene, and it was related to the Night King. After Jon's group killed the White Walker leader, the soldiers that were with him were also shattered. As Jorah pointed out on the lake, it seems as if the Whites the leader had turned into the undead were killed when he was killed. They then point out that most of them were turned by the Night King, which leads us to an important discovery. If the Night King is killed, then most of the army of the dead goes with him. Furthermore, now that we have a White Walker dragon, will killing the Night King also kill the dragon? While it might not be something we see in this finale, it is definitely something that will be revisited in Season 8. The other important takeaway here was Thoros of Myr dying. Thoros has revived Beric Dondarrion many of times, and all have been in the name of the Lord of Light. This begs the question as to what will happen if Beric or Jon dies again. It would seem that this is their last life if Thoros isn't there, but the show might be setting up a situation where Beric or Jon are brought back without the help of a Red Priest. If Bran was the Lord of Light, this would obviously make the most sense. By removing Thoros from the equation, the show creates suspense if one of these men dies, since viewers believe they need a priest to bring them back with the help from the Lord of Light. If no priest is present, the audience will believe that they will stay dead if they in fact die, hence the Hound's words that Beric was on his last life. After that short sequence, we head back to Winterfell where Sansa sends off Brienne to be the liaison for the North, and immediately after that, we see Daenerys jump on Drogon to head north for Jon. And that's when the main part of the episode begins. Once the White Walkers realize the lake is frozen again, thanks to the Hound, they surround Jon and the group. As the battle looks like it's about to claim their lives, Daenerys and her dragons swoop in to save the day. They easily wreck the army of the dead until the Night King throws an ice javelin at Viserion, which kills the dragon. As the Night King prepares another javelin, Jon gets tackled into the icy water, and Daenerys is forced to leave him behind. When Jon emerges from the water, it seems like he will surely die when he is saved by none other than Uncle Benjen, who sacrifices himself to save Jon. Jon escapes on horseback and is later reunited with Daenerys and the rest of the group. As Jon's near-lifeless body is put on the ship, Daenerys sees Jon's stab wounds and watches him closely. When Jon awakes, he pledges his allegiance to Daenerys, who also pledges to help him stop the Night King. They hold hands for a moment, and the scene ends. And in the final scene, we see the Night King resurrect Viserion as it cuts to the credits. So first, let's talk about Jon and Daenerys before we get to the most important scene in the show. If it wasn't obvious before, these two are finally going to be together. Their attraction to one another has been slowly building the entire season, and I would expect them to at least see some action in this final episode. Some key things to note: Daenerys saw Jon's wounds. That is definitely going to be a conversation they'll be having soon. Dying before is probably something you should mention to your significant other, and I'm sure they'll talk about it shortly. The question is, why exactly was that a secret the whole time, and what are the implications moving forward? Also, we have Daenerys bringing up to Jon that she can't have children and that she lost a child when she lost Viserion. As I mentioned earlier, there seems to be a reason this is repeatedly being brought up, and I'm sure we're going to find out sometime in Season 8. And lastly, as I've mentioned before for these two, when Jon finds out that he's related to Daenerys, it's going to affect their relationship moving forward. The question is how, and what's going to happen in Season 8 when that is revealed. And finally, we have the most important topic of this episode, Viserion's death. Now that the Night King has brought Viserion back, what does this mean for the rest of the story? Will the Night King ride Viserion, and how much more powerful does that make him and the army of the dead? And does Viserion's resurrection make him an ice dragon? Will he breathe ice instead of fire? Or does he still spit fire but maybe with a blue flame? And if he does spit fire, does this mean that the Night King will use the fire to bring down the wall? Or how will the dragons react to one another if they end up fighting? Or what does this mean about the three rider theory? Is that out the window now? Or how will Bran play a role in this battle? Remember, the three-eyed raven said he would fly. Does he warg into Viserion as a White Walker? And might Jon ride Viserion as Bran controls him? I mean, these are all questions that we're probably going to have to wait until Season 8 to find out. But in this last episode, I could imagine that we learn if the Night King can ride Viserion, and whether or not he breathes ice or fire. But I don't see the writers revealing much more than that. Maybe we also get to see the wall come down too as a final scene of the finale, since they love to end the last episodes with either the White Walkers or the dragons, but I can't imagine them showing any more than that since the trailer shows the main characters in King's Landing. If anything, we see a couple storylines brought together for this final episode. Sam will probably arrive in Winterfell, which might create questions about Jon's lineage. Baelish will likely be dealt with by Arya. Euron has been out of the picture, so I'm sure in the final episode it will probably include him, and maybe Yara and Theon. And lastly, we know most of the characters are meeting in King's Landing, so there is the potential for issues there. We're just going to have to wait and see what the finale has in store for us, as always. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to like it and subscribe for more Game of Thrones videos, as well as other related content. Take care.